Wealth, security, and opportunity are a byproduct of success. However, it often comes at the expense of deep personal satisfaction and happiness. This is the Design Your Destiny podcast, and I am your host, Penny Chason, board-certified hypnotist and #1 international best-selling author. I work with the highly successful influencers, business leaders, corporate leaders who desire a life by design. In this podcast, I will bring to you succinct solo episodes and interviews that dissect the challenges of success and highlights the ways to leverage your most underutilized asset, your subconscious mind. If you desire peace and happiness in your life, better health, and stronger relationships so you can enjoy the success that you have created, keep listening because this podcast is for you. Today, let's talk a little bit about energy and what it means for you as a business owner, as a human being, as a spiritual being, having a human experience, however you choose to frame it. Let's get into it. I'm Penny, host of Design Your Destiny podcast, and this morning's episode is inspired by my intuition. So I was getting ready to come into the office today, and I was actually about to leave when I felt this pull to go into a quiet space in my home. And this quiet space is a space that's really sacred to me. But either here nor there, I go in and I just take a moment and I get silent. And I just mentally asked, okay, what is the message? Like what is the purpose of connecting at this time? And I looked down at the compass that I have on this table, and I noticed that magnetic north was off by 7 to 8 degrees since I had last checked it, which was about a week ago. Now you may say, why do you have a compass like out in your space? And it's just because of the nature of the work that I do. I've shared before, I apprentice with a shaman, and part of that process is learning to be in tune with the elements and the cardinal directions. And if you've watched any news really in the last 2 or 3 years, at some point, most likely you've heard people talk about the magnetic poles going through a shift. Every so many, I don't know, millions of years, hundreds of thousands of years, the magnetic poles flip. Okay. And this is a magnetic compass, because I remember the first time this happened, I shared about it. I'm like, has anybody else noticed that magnetic north shifted? And they're like, oh, reboot your phone. Your phone needs to be rebooted. It's the app. And I'm like, no, this is a magnetic compass, right? And it fluctuates from time to time. And I bring this up because whether we choose to believe it, realize it, tune into it, or understand it, we are electromagnetic beings, and we are existing within an electromagnetic field, which is the earth, within another electromagnetic field, which is the solar system. Gravity and energy is at play everywhere. When these energies shift, and this energy can shift if you walk into a room where there's a lot of emotion, energies can shift. If you go into a store, you might notice different energies. When you go into an airport, you might notice a different energy when you go out in nature and you take a walk, or a different energy when you're with animals. Our energy is interacting with the energy around us, and it can sometimes cause physical symptoms. Now, I'm going to preface this with, this is not medical advice. I was in healthcare for 25 years. I listen to my body. I pay attention to my body. And when necessary, yes, I go to my doctor. Okay. But sometimes we have physical symptoms that don't make any sense. And like a little wave of dizziness, or like all of a sudden, like just like a wave washed over us in the ocean, right? or we might feel a little queasy, we might have a headache, our ears may start to ring, and we don't have a history of tinnitus or ringing in the ears, right? These things can happen, and what I will do is the first thing I will check is I look and I see what the moon phase is, because the moon has her own gravity, and the moon's influence is strong enough that it actually moves billions of gallons of water on a regular basis. It's our oceans. The moon is responsible for the tides in the ocean. We are mostly made up of water. So not only in water is atoms, right? So you really have to wrap your mind around this. We are made up of atoms. An atom is a proton and electrons, right? And when these protons and electrons come together in different configurations, they form what we perceive as matter, be it fabric, crystals, glass, hair, skin, water, the air that we breathe. It is all energy. Every single particle of everything around you is made up of energy. It's energy, okay? It's all energy, whether we choose to realize it or not. Sound is energy. Sound is frequency, it's vibration. And it's only perceived as sound if it vibrates yet something else made out of atoms within a perceptual range, okay? So just think about that for a little bit. So we can be impacted by this energy. I look at the moon cycles. I look at, the time of the year, the seasons of the year. I think this episode is going to come out beforehand, but there's going to be an episode coming out with Annie Redbird. We're going to be talking about sanctuary, and we're going to be talking about energy and the impact of everything around us in the seasons and the cycle. So I encourage you to listen to that when it comes out. But as we go through seasons on the planet, there's less sunshine. Sun is energy. The sun's rays. It's the sun's rays that impact the flow of sap through trees, whether or not trees are putting out leaves and blossoming, or whether they're pulling their sap back in to rest for the winter, right? So the seasons can affect us because sunlight is energy, and it impacts our bodies, because when we get sunlight hits our skin. When sunlight hits our skin, it activates a reaction within the body that converts cholesterol into vitamin D. See, we're all connected. We are part of everything around us. But these magnetic poles, there are a lot of things going on in the world right now, physically, mentally, emotionally. There's a lot of fear-based media. When on the whole, on the planet, people are in fear, we can feel that. Whether we choose to believe it or not, we get impacted by the collective energy. So when you're feeling off, when you're not feeling mentally your sharpest, when your energy is a little bit down, if you're hydrated, if you have eaten well, if you're taking care of your physical body, you're not running a fever, and you don't have a physical reason that you can pinpoint for feeling the way that you feel, consider the energy of the planet and the energy of others, and what do you need to do to tune inward so that you can focus on your own energy and begin to have an idea of what is yours and what is something else, right? Because a lot of people in this world, I have a lot of friends who are super sensitive to the energy and the emotions of people around them. In order to be able to understand yours from them, it's a practice. You have to learn it. You have to understand it. For me personally, working with clients, I guess it was in the first half of 2019, I understood very quickly, I came to understand very quickly that for me to not burn out, I have to learn how to be compassionately detached. So I literally had to decide and set the intention in my mind that I am compassionate for my clients, but at the same time, I'm not feeling for my clients. They're two very, very different things. And I think that as successful business people, when we learn to also separate our value and our worth from the business, right? So that whatever is happening in the business, if we're showing up and we're being in integrity, to separate the business, right? Because business, it fluctuates, there's ups and downs, there's things to navigate, this external stuff that is out of our control. If we tie our self-worth to that, we're going to ride an emotional roller coaster, right? So there's the energetics of the business, there's the energetics of yourself. And I realize I've gone down a real rabbit hole here, but I'm just following my sense of what needs to be shared so that maybe something will click for you, that it's important to learn more about energy, to understand that we get influenced by a lot of things. We don't have to know what those things are so much as we need to realize, or we don't need to, it's important for us to realize that that's not us, right? That it's like, oh, it's energy. Because nothing has any meaning except the meaning that we give it. And if we make it mean something about us, then that's when our thinking can get off track and we can think, oh my God, what's wrong with me? And it takes our attention off of where it needs to be and it slows us down. So I hope that you enjoyed this, that you found it worthwhile to you for today. And tune in to energy. If you're having a day where you're feeling a little off, maybe even if you are not sleeping well. So if you have a very restless night, you're not sleeping, what's the phase of the moon? Look up the Schumann resonance of the earth that day. I'm not going to sit here and give a lesson on Schumann resonance other than to say that it is the electromagnetic frequency of planet Earth. And that fluctuates depending on solar flares and different things. That fluctuates. And when it fluctuates and it's an abrupt fluctuation, it can impact us. It's other than the moon, that's like the second thing I check. When I'm really feeling off, I'm like, oh my goodness, what's a Schumann resonance? Why would I check the Schumann resonance? Because you can go on YouTube and you can search for a Schumann resonance frequency and you can play music in the background. Remember, sound is frequency. When the energy is really off and I feel like I'm coming out of my skin and there's no reason, like I'm not anxious, my mind's not racing, but like, why do I feel like I'm coming out of my skin? If the Schumann resonance is off, I play that music in the background. And I'll give you a tip. If you have kids and they're just having like a really wild, crazy, nutty day, find some Schumann resonance that you can turn on and turn it down real low in the background. I've done it. They will start to settle. They will start to settle because kids these days are very sensitive to energy and frequency. And if you don't believe me, look at all these kids that they talk about how they might be on the spectrum. They're very sensitive to lights, to sounds, to voices. That's because we're sensory beings. We're all sensitive to those things. It's just, for most of us, it's not to the point that it's disruptive for us. But kids these days are different. So I would take a look into that. I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to this episode of Design Your Destiny. I would love to know what resonated most with you. So just take a screenshot of this episode, share it over on your Instagram stories, and tag me at penny.chason and let me know what you thought. Also, if you head over to iTunes and you leave a positive review, it helps this podcast to help reach even more people, making a difference, elevating humanity and mankind.